Mr. Speaker, I think these Liberals need to be honest with Canadians. They're benefiting from inflation. While record numbers of Canadians use food banks, they're raking in record revenues. But their greed knows no bounds, Mr. Speaker. They want more and more of Canadian dollars. When will these cold-hearted Liberals finally show some compassion, give Canadians a break, and pull their tax hikes off the table?
The Honourable Minister for Families.
Mr. Speaker, the Conservatives want to talk about compassion. They're the ones that blocked for a number of days the ability to pass dental benefits for low-income children. Mr. Speaker, compassion, they're the ones that voted against supporting low-income renters pay their rent. Mr. Speaker, they voted against the Canada Child Benefit that supports 9 out of 10 Canadian families. They voted against affordable childcare, Mr. Speaker. They voted against tax cuts for middle-income Canadians. Mr. Speaker, it's beyond comprehension that they would talk about compassion when they vote against supporting Canadians at every single instance.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians have never paid more taxes than they do now under this Prime Minister.
That's right.
The inflation rate is the highest in 40 years, which means Canadians pay more for gasoline, groceries, and home heating. Some say it's just inflation, but inflation means higher prices for Canadians and more money in the Liberal government's pocket. It's the inflation tax, the cruelest tax of all. When will the Prime Minister stop the inflation tax and stop his inflationary spending?
Good question.
The Honourable Minister for Tourism.
Speaker, if pandemic spending, investments in Canadians that got us through the worst pandemic in a century were inflationary, then we'd be on our own in the world. We'd have the highest inflation in the world. Guess what, Mr. Speaker? Germany's at 10%. The UK is at 10.1, the US is at 8.2, EU is at 9.9, Australia is at 7.3, we're at 6.9. That doesn't make a difference to the people at home, Mr. Speaker. What does is dental supports and rental supports and doubling the GST tax credit, not the proposed cuts by the Conservatives. We've got the backs of Canadians, they've got bluff and bluster.
Well, under this Liberal government, Canadians are paying record high taxes, and Liberal inflation means Canadians are also paying record high prices for gas, groceries, and home heating bills. Millions of Canadians are skipping meals or using the food bank because they can't afford to buy groceries, and millions more will have to choose between heating and eating this winter. Canadians are out of money, and this government is out of touch. So why don't they stop making things worse, stop their out-of-control spending, and stop these Liberal inflation taxes?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I'll tell you what's out of touch. What's out of touch is blaming the most vulnerable Canadians, and this government supporting them on somehow increasing inflation. It's hogwash, it's poppycock, it's simply not true, and it's cruel, Mr. Speaker. Our supports are 1/1000th the size of our economy. It will not increase inflation, and misinformation and disinformation have no place in this chamber, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Chilliwack Hope.
It is unbelievable for this government to brag about a system and policies that have 1.5 million Canadians using the food bank every month, that have 1 in 5 Canadians skipping meals because they can't buy groceries. We will take no lessons from a government whose policies are creating higher interest rates, higher inflation, out-of-control spending that is driving up the cost of living to the worst record, the worst situation for the cost of living in decades. Why don't they stop making it worse, stop their out-of-control spending, and stop their Liberal inflation tax?
The Honourable Minister for Families.
Mr. Speaker, it's a bit rich coming from the member opposite that he wants to talk about supporting Canadians when every single chance he has voted against measures that support Canadians. Mr. Speaker, when they talk about the spending that we have done, Mr. Speaker, that's thousands of dollars for Canadian families that are helping them with the high cost of living. Mr. Speaker, we know what would happen if the Conservatives were in power. They would abandon those most vulnerable Canadians who need that support. And when they're talking about taxes, they're talking about things that pay for EI. They're talking about things that pay for CPP.
The Honourable Member for Nunavut.
Mr. Speaker, 20% of Canadians skip at least 1 meal per week to save money. 1.5 million Canadians visited food banks in 1 month alone. How do we get here? with the mismanagement of this government that has created inflationary deficits year after year after year after year. After all, it's not surprising. Monetary policy is not part of the PM's vocabulary. Can he at least assure us here in this House that he will not raise taxes on Canadians? The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, on this side of the House, we are here every day to support Canadians with the Canada Child Benefit, with tax reductions for the middle class, with benefits for dental care and rental support. Also during the pandemic, this government has been here and will continue to be so for Canadians, and it's unfortunately that every opportunity the Conservatives vote against these initiatives that are important, that help Canadians who are in need. Thank you.